Do you think one mind is better than many? Neither do we. A University of Chicago Booth School of Business MBA is for curious and collaborative people who value different perspectives and ideas. Chicago Booth takes pride in empowering and being empowered by women of diverse backgrounds. We believe that fostering an inclusive community creates an environment of analytical, open minded inquiry and produces knowledge with enduring impact. Learn more today at chicagobooth.edu/elevate. Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Ellevate podcast, History Makers. I'm so excited for our podcast guest today. She is not quite a local. I know I live in Texas now, but she's from Oklahoma, which is basically our sister state. So we talk a little bit about that. But I'm talking today with Annie Menz, who is the first Latina to serve in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. We talk about local politics and how important they are. We talk about her journey. We talk a little bit about OU. She doesn't quite have OU in her district, but she has a lot of that area. And it's just a great conversation. So I cannot wait to get to it. Let's go ahead and cut to it now. Hi, everybody. Today I have Annie Menz.
Hello. So glad to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
So great to have you. And as somebody who, I was born in Maryland, but I grew up in Texas and recently moved back. There's always kind of that friendly rivalry with Oklahoma and Texas, but it's nice to have somebody from that same area.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to start out with the big question. I know it's broad. You can interpret it however you like. How did you get to where you are today?
So that's a good question. So where I'm at today, I'm going to start there and then maybe work my way back. So as you mentioned, I am a representative in the Oklahoma House of Representatives. I represent House District 45, which is East Norman. And I was just elected last November. So I'm a freshman. And before that, I was nonpartisan Senate staff in the Oklahoma State Senate. Before that, I was nonpartisan House staff. I was a legislative assistant in the House for a couple of years. Before that, rewinding a little bit there, from there, I was a political consultant and super volunteer. So I was involved in doing all of that for several years, as I was also a stay-at-home mom and college student. Just had a lot of irons in the fire there. I've worked also in the nonprofit sector. I was a member of the United States Navy, and I was also married to a Marine. So there's a lot of moving around. But all of that to say that every path I took and everything I worked on, every experience I had, led me to this point, to saying, looking around at the situation that we're in Oklahoma, and that people like me are in here, and saying, it's time for me to step up. So, yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell how I got to where I am.
I love that. Now you mentioned you have East Norman. Do you have Oklahoma University in your area?
I do not have OU in my district. I do have a lot of students and employees who live in my district. Norman's it's an exurb of Oklahoma City. It's a large, small town. We say that. It's a college town for sure. We love it. There's no place on earth like it for sure. But I do not have OU in my district. I have half of Lake Thunderbird and a large rural area of Norman, and then like a strip of urban and some neighborhoods. So I've got kind of like the eastern outskirts of Norman.
But plenty of students and everything, which
Oh yeah. I have a very diverse district. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like diverse in several ways, like socioeconomically, racially, age. Like it's diverse. I'm very glad to be able to represent. I think I fit it well, and luckily the voters thought so too. So
absolutely, yeah. I asked it kicked off in my head because I'm a huge gymnastics fan, and OU has the best gymnastics program in the NCAA right now.
That's right. So Boomer Seniors.
Yes. Oh, they're fabulous. Yeah. So, one thing that I always love to ask our politicians is what was election night like for you?
So I can't talk about my election without talking about the elections of two of my colleagues and very best friends, Representative Jared Deck and Representative Jacob Rosecrans. And those guys represent the other parts of Norman that I do not. So I said I have East Norman. Jared Deck has Core Norman, so the University of Oklahoma is in his district. And then on the other side, on West Norman, is Jacob Rosecrans. And those guys, they're like my brothers. We had our watch party together. We shared campaigns. We had the same campaign staff. We did. We still do lots of things together. We're actually going to be having our campaign launch this month together, the three of us. So our election night was it was it was like a blur. I knew that it was historic. That part wasn't lost on me because, as I said, I represent my district and I think I do it well. And it's an honor definitely to do that. But I also represent every Latina in the state of Oklahoma. When I walk in that chamber, and so that's not lost on me. That the the momentous occasion that night on election night, but it was also like as I was watching the numbers come in, I was always looking over my precinct stuff and checking in with my with our campaign manager. I was also looking at theirs, right? I was also because it was like, how am I going to do this if Jared and Jacob don't win? How is it like? So I was trying to play out, the different scenarios. Okay, what if Jared and I win, but Jacob loses? What if Jacob and Jared win, but I lose? And so it was just kind of just the whole of Norman was really in my heart that night. Not just my district, but it was kind of nerve wracking watching all of that. So luckily, we were blessed to have all won. Jared and I are freshmen. Jacob is incumbent, so he's a senior member and has been amazing with us. And so I mean, it was family, kids, food, mentors, just the members of the community, other elected officials. I mean, just it was a really great night. I was kind of hyper focused on our three races. And then once we cleared, I was looking at, our statewide because we had a pretty controversial, very interesting few handful of statewide candidates. So it was a lot of ups and downs, Megan. I'm not going to lie, there were lots of ups and downs that night. But it was nice to have been kind of a beacon in Norman for other parts of the state that may not yet be able to elect three Democrats in one fell swoop in one night, and we're kind of disappointed in some of the other results and have been steadily disappointed in the lack of leadership as a result of those elections specifically. But yeah, it was a roller coaster for sure. But I would do it over again in a heartbeat.
I can only imagine. And I love that you mention it kind of being a team effort of like you and the two others, because I had never really thought of it like that, of like you're so in my mind it's like you're so focused on your race, but you were like, okay, we got to think strategy. If I win and they don't win, what does that look like I had never really thought of it like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think being so as I mentioned, I'm a Democrat, and in Oklahoma we have such a supermajority, Republican supermajority, that kind of lends itself to the minority being very close knit. And then in a place like Norman, where the rest of the state looks at us and thinks that we are, far fringe left, without ever even coming here and talking to any of us. They think that nobody knows each other, that we are basically like California, and it's just so not true. I mean, um, there are lots of conservative people in Norman. Some of them voted for me. I'm here to represent everyone, you know, no matter what their registration is. Um, and it still kind of lends itself to this, like the three of us kind of showing that there is a cohesive team for Norman, that we are not willing to back down, but we are willing to work with whoever we need to work with on either side of the aisle, to get things done for the people of Norman. And that's something that I'm proud to say we did this session. So our legislative session is from February to May, and the three of us worked really hard. I mean, day in, day out, and we're still working hard to get things set up for next year. Um, and it is very much a team effort. It's very much like, if I didn't get a bill heard today, but Jared did, I'm cheering him on. Like it's even, I mean, even the smallest bits help whenever you are standing up to a giant that is a super majority. It's, I mean, it's a steady, slow crawl, but we're getting there. And I think that the three of us have just been able to discover that we'll get there better and safer and healthier if we do it together.
Absolutely. And I think that's something a lot of people that haven't spent a lot of time in the South or the Southwest don't realize is sometimes with super majorities, it can seem like it's such a monolith, but like the politics of the South are so diverse. Like, yeah,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I so one of the things that I say when I go to speaking engagements and people ask me about this, I say, people think that because Democrats are in such a terrible minority in the legislature that we get picked on and singled out, and that's not the case. The most dangerous position to be in that building right now is not that of a Democrat. It's a moderate Republican. They're the ones that are being, they're people are gunning for them. Like that's just plain and simple. I mean, if I see something that is egregious that has happened, I can come out and I can put out a statement that is fiery and meaningful, and my leadership is not going to tell me to shut up and sit down. They're not going to tell me that I need to sidestep it or be careful. um, an example is, recently our governor sent, some of our guardsmen to the southern border as a show of support for some federal things going on, and it was a political stunt. I called it out. I was on the news, and you know what, my caucus leader was right there with me, calling it out too. She issued a statement too. And I mean, we we are in this position where, we're coming out swinging because we can. And I know for a fact that I have Republican colleagues who felt the exact same way and wanted to say the exact same things, but they didn't because they couldn't. And so people think, oh, well, yeah, one party rule, that makes sense because that way it's all cohesive. It's not. They have several factions. They have several factions, and it's not as organized as people think.
definitely. So I want to get into a little bit. You kind of touched on it. I talked to somebody recently too about this. I think there's this idea with people for a wide variety of reasons. My vote doesn't matter. And first of all, it absolutely does, including in federal elections. But I think more than anything, local politics is it so matters there. Do you want to talk a little bit about, how important local politics are for what's going on in your day to day?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from the state legislature all the way down to municipal, so that's your city councilor, your mayor, um, all the way down to the school board members that you have. I mean, your county commissioners. I mean, everything, these people make decisions on your behalf. They're supposed to be keeping what's best for you and your neighbors in mind, which, if you think about that, like just take a moment to think about all your neighbors. Do you agree with every single little thing that they agree with? Do they agree with every single way that you live your life? No, we are all different. It's a tough job to represent that many different, backgrounds and sensibilities and positions. um, it's important to send the right person to do that. Someone thoughtful, uh, and strong, and intelligent, someone who is open and at least willing to listen and learn, not just to their colleagues and to the people that they are being sent to work with, but most importantly to you and your neighbors. Um, even if your neighbor has an opposing viewpoint to your own, I mean, somebody who will show up and listen to both, and then do what's right for the betterment of your community. Um, it's so important. Whenever we think of, I mean, I don't know what it's like in other towns, but I know in Norman, some of our main concerns are traffic, homelessness, affordable housing. We've got a turnpike issue out here in my district. I mean, these are things that all levels of government will touch upon. Um, so it's very important to keep in mind, like, we didn't just show up on Earth and everything was just the way it is magically. Everything has happened because of decisions that were made by people. Um, so it's important to show up and pick the right people.
Absolutely. And all that goes to say, vote. Please vote, guys.
Yes, please.
Yes, definitely vote. So, one thing that I like to ask all the others that are in politics, as crazy as that job that you just described is, if for some reason somebody at home wanted to get into politics and get into that crazy world, what would your advice for them be?
Yeah, so I love this because typically, whenever I get to answer this questions, I'm talking to high school kids or college kids. Um, at a panel or a speaking engagement, and they're all just like super excited. And that's one of my favorite things about this, is just going out and trying to inspire our younger generation to get involved. But certainly, any point in life, it's never too late. It's never too late to get involved. I mean, so my advice, I got started volunteering on campaigns. I mean, if there is a candidate that out there that you like, Democrat, Republican, whatever, find out if they're running again, or find out if they need help with anything, and get yourself involved. Even if it's, I mean, licking envelopes or knocking doors or whatever, there's an opportunity to learn. I mean, that's everybody has to start somewhere, and that's a good way to do it. Also, there are internships. There's in Oklahoma, we have a PAGE program, so high schoolers get to come and volunteer um, at our state capitol and our legislative offices, and kind of just see the ins and outs. They get to meet the governor and go to museum tours, and hang out with legislators and ask questions. And they have like a mock legislature that they do, so they get to like see how it is to run a bill and everything. Um, and it's really neat. So, I mean, there are lots of different ways, but I would say, don't like take everything that you see on the news to heart and write it all off, because while there are some challenges and difficulties, there are things that happen that are disheartening, but there are also very good things that we can do. There are also great things that we can do for people, if we just get more folks involved. So that would be my advice on maybe where to start, is just kind of figure out how you can get involved.
True, true, true. And I always, first of all, I kind of, the Southwest has such a huge Latin American population that when I found out you were the first Latina to serve in the Oklahoma House of Representatives, I was like, are you kidding? How?
Oh, that's so funny that you mentioned that. So, our state Democratic Party had our convention recently, and our keynote for our dinner was the Honorable Beto O'Rourke. It was really cool to meet him. Um, and so afterwards, I went up with one of my colleagues, and he introduced me to Beto and was like, this is Annie. She's the first Latina elected to the state house here. And Beto was like, oh, that's great. How long have you been there? And I said, oh, I just got elected in November. And he goes, oh, this just happened. Like, he was so surprised. Like, what? Yeah. And he's from Texas. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it just happened. And so there have been times that I also am the founder of the annual Hispanic Cultural Day at the state capitol. Um, and that was another moment, like me being elected, where I thought, this is really cool. I'm happy to be doing this, but it's also just a little bit maddening that there wasn't a thing before I got here. Like, but that's the thing about representation. I mean, if you are looking into doing something and you don't see anybody that looks like you have the obligation to become that. It's an honor. I mean, you have to become that example for others. So, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. But I'm really excited though to have been able to do it because I mean, I've got little sister, I've got nieces and family friends who they might want to crack into politics now, and maybe before they didn't think they could. So I'm just happy to serve for sure.
Absolutely. And I do have to say, when you said you met Beto, I would like, as a person who, grew up in Texas, I kind of went, ah.
Yeah, he's as cool as he seems.
Okay, that is good to know.
Yeah.
So I also want to bring up a question that I had as you were saying all that. When did you realize you would be the first? Did you realize it when you started the campaign, or like partway through you started getting press? Like, when did you realize, oh, I could be the first?
So, one of my very good friends and mentors is Senator Michael Brooks Jimenez. He is the state senator here for South Oklahoma City. Um, and I worked for him. I worked in the Senate. I was his executive assistant for 5 years. So I helped him, with his legislation, with office management stuff, with um, I mean, you name it, pretty much everything in his Senate office that he asked me to do, I was happy to help. And one of the things, I mean, we would always talk about, you know, starting a Latino caucus. We've got to get more Latinos elected. That's something that, like, from the very beginning in conversations with him, was so important. That was one of the big reasons why he himself got elected. And I never really understood that until I got elected. But one of his biggest things was, I mean, I'm doing this because I want to see more representation, people like us. I want to get more Latinos elected. And so he would say things like that, and I would say, okay, let's get to work. How do I get that? He said he wanted it. How do I do it? And so I would go around and try and find more Latinos to run for things, right? Like, um, we would try to recruit them, and it just, like, having served over in the House on the staff side, um, while I was a legislative assistant in the House, I was the only Latina legislative assistant there, for the longest time, and then over in the Senate as well. And so it's something that I was keenly aware of every day at work, just the lack of bices in the building. And so it's just something that I knew. And then I don't know if I could pinpoint an exact moment where I went and looked it up. I knew. So while I was there over in the House on the staff side, um, there was a gentleman by the name of Charles Ortega. He is a former representative now. He was the first Latino elected to the state house, and he was still serving when I was an assistant there, like 7 years ago. Um, he still works for state government. Wonderful guy. Um, but just thinking, okay, so if he was the first Latino elected, who was the first Latina elected? There hasn't been one. And then so last year it was me to the House. The cycle previous was the first Latina ever elected to the Oklahoma legislature, Senator Jessica Garvin. And she was, of course, first elected to the Senate as well. And so she's a pretty big deal. Also for me, like, I look up to her a lot, even though we're not from the same party. She represents rural parts of the state, and I represent, a more kind of urban area. But she's a wonderful role model for me in other ways. And anyway, so yeah, I mean, I think it was just kind of as a result of us channeling our ganas and like our want and need to get more Latinos elected, and just kind of researching and looking into the makeup of the legislature.
Absolutely. And I actually love that you mentioned that she's not of the same party as you, because I think people don't realize the Latin American community is widely diverse. Like, it's not one single voter that they're trying to talk to. It's we're talking about millions of different people that live in just all over the place, and is a wide-ranging community.
Oh yeah, I mean, I that's it's very important to remember that. I mean, Senator Garvin and I um, share Mexican heritage, but I mean, even in my district, I have a wide range of Latinos who live here. So I've got like Panamanian constituents and Colombian American constituent. I mean, and then in Oklahoma as a whole, like there's a Latino presence here that is very diverse. We're definitely not a monolith, and even whenever we're talking about politics, it splits even further, I mean, considering how many political, just Mexico, one country alone, how many political parties they have, and how that influences the generations here who've immigrated here. And then, the political situation in Venezuela, how that, or Cuba, how we see how that, impacts the way that Cuban American descendants, vote here. I mean, it's we're definitely not a monolith. All these things play in, and so yeah, that's definitely. I'm glad you brought that up because that's definitely a good thing to remember.
Absolutely. So we are actually, I can't believe we're already here, but we are on to our last question,
Yeah.
which you actually alluded to a bit earlier, but figure might as well ask it anyway. We all stand on the shoulders of others before us. And so I always love to ask our history makers at the end of each episode, who is a history maker or history makers that inspired you?
Yeah, so definitely Senator Brooks Jimenez. He was the first Latino elected to the state Senate here. Um, he's been practicing immigration and criminal defense for like over 20 years. He's smart and compassionate and is an inspiration for me, whether or not he realizes it most of the time. I mean, um, so he's probably number one. Senator Kay Floyd is another one. She is the Democratic minority leader in the Senate here. She's a trailblazer and history maker in her, like, in so many ways. She's done so many things, and I don't know. I know I don't tell her this enough, but I am so proud to know her, and I never would have been able to get elected if it wasn't for women like her who have paved the way for girls like me. Um, so Kay Floyd, also Cindy Munson, Representative Cindy Munson. She's actually my caucus minority leader in the House. Um, she's the first Asian American woman elected to the Oklahoma House of Representatives, and she is, without it, she's so tough. She's so sweet though, and smart. And I mean, I would follow her anywhere. She's wonderful. And it's a tough job, but Cindy shows up for us consistently and makes sure that we understand that there is someone there, that there's a gentle, presence, and that it's okay to be vulnerable and tough. Um, and so, I mean, I just appreciate all of the work that she has done before I even got there, and all the work that she continues to um, to get through. So, yeah, and then of course Jared and Jacob. I mean, those guys. I mean, those guys inspire me very, very much every day. Um, we're working in tandem a lot of the times. Jacob has been there longer than Jared and I, but and he's so much tougher and stronger than he thinks he is. Jared is brilliant in so many, many ways. I mean, he's literally a rock star. Um, like, he's on Spotify. I'm not kidding. And he does all of this other like legislative work, and he's just amazing. So I mean, I'm very blessed to have been able to surround myself um, with with really great, inspiring people. And that's another point of advice I would give for anybody wanting to do this. Make sure that you surround yourself with the right kind of people.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you have anything else that you want to say to the audience before you go?
Thank you so much. Keep staying involved, keep listening. You know, do the best you can for as many as you can while you can.
Amen. I don't have anything better to end it on than that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ellevate Network drives real results for ambitious women trying to break through the glass ceiling and achieve success in their careers. We offer a platform full of resources and opportunities for growth, all designed to help you unlock your potential. With Ellevate's support, you can take the first step toward achieving your professional goals. With a supportive community and tangible resources at your fingertips, you're only one step away from reaching your fullest potential. Join us today and take advantage of our 30-day free trial to start building the career of your dreams. Thanks so much for listening to the Ellevate podcast. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe, give us 5 stars, and share your review. You can learn all about Ellevate membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Katherine Heller. She rocks. Thanks so much, and join us next week.